The 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch. Summary. The 80-20 Principle is a startling assessment of how lopsided life's equations are, with recommendations on how to focus our energies on what counts most. Strive for excellence in a few areas rather than mediocrity in many. Because of this classic examination of the numbers underpinning success, the 80-20 ratio has become a fairly recognized notion. Richard Koch is a well-known management consultant, serial investor, and entrepreneur who has worked with companies such as Filofax and Bitfair. Koch, a staunch believer in choosing the correct basket and placing most of your eggs in it, practices what he preaches. The 80-20 Principle, the secret to achieving more with less, contains realistic stories and actionable advice that will help anyone prioritize well in business and in life. According to the 80-20 Principle, there is an inherent imbalance between causes and consequences, inputs and outputs, and efforts and rewards. Using 80-20 thinking will benefit your daily life in multiple ways. 80-20 thinkers understand what causes them to be happy and pursue it actively, enthusiastically, and intelligently, using happiness today to grow and multiply happiness tomorrow. The 80-20 concept is based on the idea that in both company and personal productivity, around 80% of results come from around 20% of the overall effort. Rather than spreading yourself too thin, concentrating your efforts on the most critical things might help you enjoy larger benefits. We may all benefit from a personal time revolution, and understanding the importance of effort versus reward pays well. Most of us waste our free time doing things that don't make us happy when we could be spending it on things that do. Of course, some contrast is required. We'd take everything for granted if every day was a vacation. Allowing for gray regions does not render the principle worthless. Rather, it enables a nuanced, emotionally savvy approach to assessing what truly matters to us. In general, our most memorable experiences are accounted for by a small percentage of our friendships and social contacts. Our most valuable resource is time, and it makes sense to use it wisely. We don't know when it will run out because it's a limited resource. The majority of people's noteworthy achievements occur in a small percentage of their lives. The majority of what we do is insignificant in comparison to the brief moments of time spent accomplishing great things and spending time with the people we care about. Identify your happiest moments and then double them. When have you been the happiest in your life? What were you doing? Where were you going, and who were you with at the time? It really is that easy. Making a note of when you were the happiest allows you to replicate those feelings time and again. Spend as little time as possible with people you dislike. Why spend so much time with people you'd rather avoid, such as poisonous friendships or work relationships? Examine your contact list and consider who makes you feel good about yourself and who doesn't. Spend your time wisely and with the appropriate people. Using the 80-20 rule will increase the efficiency of any firm. Unless you have employed the 80-20 principle to reorient your plan, you can be very certain that it is severely faulty. Most firms continue to operate under the human notion that results follow a logical, obvious pattern. The harder you work, the better you do. Other prevalent misconceptions are that providing more options leads to greater sales or that working longer hours produces better outcomes. The oversimplified idea that more is not backed by data. It's all about working smarter rather than harder. A limited number of items typically generates more profit than a larger range, but businesses continue to refuse to reduce their quantities. According to studies, removing marginal products off the shelves has no detrimental impact on consumer perception and, in fact, often improves it. Focusing on the relatively small number of clients who are most active in consuming your product or service is the key to successful marketing. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company had over 300 products. He decreased the figure to less than 10. This strong attention enabled Jobs to build on existing successful bestsellers and transform them into the household names they are today. The notion of preferring diamonds over the rest also applies to clients and customers. Most organizations produce the majority of their revenue from approximately 20% of their client base, so focus your efforts accordingly. While our tendency is to pay equal attention to everyone, Statistics show that establishing a new, specialized instinct is the greatest approach to achieving success. Simplify and concentrate. Don't just take things at face value. Go deeper into the data to discover what's actually driving your success, or lack thereof. Identify trends, locate blockbusters, and develop your market. Then you can start planning your next steps to achieve greater success. Also, focus on the big fish. Concentrating efforts on the most engaged 20% of customers are simpler, less expensive, and far more effective than attempting to target everyone, 80% of whom aren't very devoted or profitable. Although 80-20 is not a universal principle, it does apply in various situations. The 80-20 rule is a useful metaphor and concept, but it is not the only one. Many case studies have indicated a reward balance that is much higher than 80-20. Only around 3% of the books accessible in the United States account for more than 90% of monthly sales, whereas only about 3% of the words available in English account for 97% of those used. Wealth is unequally distributed. The richest 1% of humanity own a hugely disproportionate percentage of the world's riches, and this gap is widening. Repetitive feedback loops and the compound interest effect are to blame for such huge disparities. When you put 5 fish of comparable size in a pond, one will grow much larger than the others. That particular fish may have started with a slight edge, but it was still able to catch more food. Each feeding cycle contributes a little more to one side of the equation. In finance, the somewhat wealthier individual who is able to reinvest more gains will surely become much wealthier than the individual who must consume what they make. A 97/3 ratio may appear to be very different from an 80-20 ratio, but it is only a more extreme demonstration of the same point. The universe is unbalanced and operates according to unfair but predictable norms. It may be difficult to identify the root cause, but once we learn to look for it, the result is visible and actionable for all. Not all efforts produce the same outcomes. Once we learn to adapt our efforts to it, we will see an increase in our productivity, success, and satisfaction.